What is going on, X-Men fans? It's me, the X-Men guy, back again with another podcast episode. So, last week we talked about why the Krakoan era wasn't dead. And, fun fact, the Krakoan era was started by one of the greatest writers of our generation, comic writers of our generation, maybe one of the greatest comic writers of all time, Jonathan Hickman. Now, Jonathan Hickman is behind great stories such as Secret Wars 2015, obviously the Krakoan era. He reinvented Fantastic Four and the Avengers. He's just a great writer. So, imagine the people's surprise, and comic fans all over the world surprise, and excitement when it was announced that Jonathan Hickman would be spearheading the new Ultimate Universe. Now, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't know what the Ultimate Universe was, because the Ultimate Universe is very much something that, if you're not that into comics, you probably don't know about. So, a brief history on it is basically, in the 90s, Marvel was bankrupt. I think if you're even a little bit well-versed in comic history, you'll know that they had to sell off the rights to their characters, all of that kind of stuff. Then, what they did basically after they sold off all the rights to the characters, like film rights, they spearheaded a lot of things to get them out of bankruptcy. Now, right after that, to regain popularity, to essentially gain, how do I put this, their footing back and gain newer fans, they started a new universe, a new jumping on point for fans who, for people who wanted to give comics a chance, but was just so overwhelmed with the many, many issues of different books and the convoluted continuity of this universe. So they started the Ultimate Universe. Now, the Ultimate Universe started off with a bang. Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man was written by Brian Michael Bendis, and soon titles like X-Men, Ultimate, I think Daredevil was one, so many more, the Ultimates, which was basically Ultimate Avengers, so many spin-offs, and that created this whole universe that ultimately culminated in Secret Wars 2015, written by Jonathan Hickman. Fun fact, Miles Morales came out of the Ultimate Universe. So basically, towards the end of last year, Jonathan Hickman was tasked with the limited series, I think it was 5 or 6 issues, Ultimate Invasion. Ultimate Invasion's whole goal was basically to bring back the Ultimate Universe. So, the Reed Richards of the Ultimate Universe, the Maker, they call him, it turned evil, but now he's even more powerful than ever before. And by doing this, the Maker, he essentially becomes the smartest, most powerful being in the world, or maybe in the whole multiverse. So he hasn't died since Secret Wars, but he's been imprisoned for a while, top security prison. And in Ultimate Invasion, he's basically broken out of prison. And he goes to Miles Morales because he's the only other survivor of his universe. He's like, "Do you want to join me?" Miles Morales obviously says no. He's very confused. And so he goes off to form the new universe, or the new Ultimate Universe now. Eventually, he forms it. And how he does it is preventing heroes from becoming heroes. So, for example, he swatted the spider from, or took the spider away from Peter Parker before it was able to bite him, and just a lot of stuff like that. So he developed this secret council to rule the world, kind of like shadow leaders who would rule the world and make what he wanted happen in this world. Tony Stark, the son of Howard Stark is actually Iron Man in that universe. Tony Stark discovers this council, so seeing this, the council destroys, well, not fully destroy, but launches an attack on New York, killing thousands, and pins it on Tony Stark. And that's where we pick up for what we will be talking about today. Ultimate Spider-Man, issue 1 and 2. The new ones, written by Jonathan Hickman. So, we pick up in January. Peter Parker has a full beard, and he's getting up, getting ready for work. And he's like, what's funny is that he looks in the mirror and he says, Peter Parker, you aren't getting any younger. And what's funny about that is, to him, in this universe, he's been aging for a while. But to us, as the readers, he has been the same age for decades. And we've just been dying to see him grow up, marry MJ, do all of those things. And in this issue, we finally get to see that. Because when you turn the page, you see him getting ready. He grabs a ring, puts it on his finger, leaves his room, and we see his kids. There's Richard and May. Richard's the older brother. He seems to be a bit of a nerd. And May, obviously named after Aunt May, seems to just be, a go-lucky little girl, believing in unicorns, stuff like that. Important thing to know in this universe, the events of Ultimate Invasion happened 20 years ago. So the attack on New York, Tony Stark, who is believed to be dead, all of that happened 20 years ago. Then we see MJ walk in the room, and her basically being Peter's wife. We get a lot of that. We see what a standard morning in this family's life is like. And then we see May Parker playing around with the sphere that she finds in her dad's bag. And what Peter says is like, not a toy, kiddo, and snatches it away from her very fastly. So then he walks out of the room and makes his way to his job at the Daily Bugle. And we see J. Jonah Jameson screaming Parker across the room. And you think that he's going to yell at Peter. But then he walks past him and is like, oh, hey there, Peter. And he's like, morning, boss. How are you? And then he's like, no time for chit-chat. And walks past him and continues to scream Parker. That's when it's revealed that the Parker that he's yelling at is Ben Parker, managing editor. Uncle Ben is still alive in this universe. So they're basically talking. And what we learn from the conversation is that Ben and J. Jonah have been working at the Bugle for years. They're basically business buddies, And Ben and Peter have to go to this thing. We're not going to reveal what it is yet, but they have to go to this thing. And what we end up learning from this, as Ben walks ahead of Peter, is that in this universe, instead of being the angry boss that he is, J. Jonah is really a mentor to Peter, and he stops Peter before he goes out and actually just gives him a tie, because he's like, you can't be going to a formal event without a tie, and he ties it for him. He's kind of, not like a father figure, because that's really what Uncle Ben does, and kind of like a mentor. And as Uncle Ben and Peter walk down the street, Peter asks Ben if he's okay, and Ben replies, when you lost your parents, were you okay? You you get over it eventually, but you never truly do. You just learn to deal with it. And he says, that's exactly how I feel. Once we get to where they're going, it seems to be in, I believe, what I believe to be Central Park. No, not Central Park. Somewhere. It's a gathering of a lot of people. And we see on these big stone walls names etched into them. What we see here, the main one, May Parker. So we learned that these walls are basically a memorial to the people who were lost 20 years ago in the attack on New York, headed by the Maker, or supposedly Tony Stark. Some other names that we see here are Emily Osborn, Norman Osborn, and I think there were some other ones that I saw. No, maybe not. Huh. I swear I saw someone else important, but I don't know. Anyway, we quickly learn that the priest that's talking on the podium is actually Matt Murdock. And so in this universe, instead of becoming Daredevil, he becomes a priest. And he's basically escorted off because he's blind, and after he's done his speech, and then Harry Osborn steps to the podium. He says, thank you, Father. It's an emotional day, and Father Murdock is right. The air is thick with memories. The one I keep thinking of is one about me and my father playing catch. He then says that him and his father, neither of them liked baseball. But when they played catch, this memory keeps coming back to him. Now, he says that for the last 20 years he's been puzzled why that memory comes back to him, and he's finally found out is because he can never make a memory like that with his father ever again. His father is Norman Osborn, who he previously saw. Him and Emily Osborn both died 20 years ago in those attacks. And then the background of the panels start getting darker, and Harry's face starts getting sterner, and he starts trailing off. But then he snaps back into it, which is a hint to what we see, what most people think we'll see later in the series. Then we head back to the Bugle, where we again see Jonah screaming, but this time he darts out of the conference room doors saying, I quit. Now, he then sternly walks through the room and says and just stares at Peter and Ben. Ben goes into the conference room and asks Robbie Robertson, so did I miss something? Then Robbie Robertson replies, you did, Ben. We've been informed that there is going to be some editorial restructuring at the paper. Jonah didn't care for the changes. And what Ben asks Robbie is, what do you think about the changes? Robbie says he doesn't really care. He's 2 years away from retirement, and he's just going to ride out the rest of his time at the company. Then we pan over to the other side of the table, where we see Wilson Fisk and this bald man with an eye patch behind him. And what Fisk basically says is that they're going to be making some changes, some of them corrupt, and all Ben does is smirk, walk out, and step into the elevator with Jameson. We then see outside of the Bugle the Kingpin's car getting bombed right as he's about to get into it, and the Green Goblin soaring away. And I actually really like this. I really like this new redesign for the Green Goblin because it's so cool. It's like armored and stuff. It's just really cool. We then see Jonah and Ben at the bar. Now they're chugging down some beers, talking about just quitting, and they decide to start a new business, but they're going to do it better. Ben suggests that they tell the truth. Jonah belts out laughing. He ironically states that the truth, that's perfect. Thanks for that. He then says, there are some things I like to believe in, Ben, that I'm not going to die alone, that there is such a thing as justice, but in this entire universe, there's only one thing I know for sure, and that there is no truth in the news, and no news in the truth. So he basically says that news is a dirty business. And he says, so how about this? We promise not to lie. And then Ben basically says, sounds like a fair start. So Ben doesn't completely conform to his views, but he also acknowledges that there is some truth to what Jonah is saying. Then Peter walks in on Jonah and Ben. He asks Ben, how did you do this? How did you just blow up your life, and now, hours later, you're starting a whole new one? And Ben replies, Peter, my wife is dead. You're a grown man and have a family of your own. And given the opportunity, I just couldn't take being in an industry of compromise one more minute. Why wouldn't I do what I did? It was an easy choice. He then asks Peter what's going on. He says, well, my wife is very much alive, and I have a family and responsibilities that exceed professional bliss. I don't know that I can blow everything up just because I want my life to change. Ben then says, Peter, no one's expecting you to join us. If you do, then that's great. Peter cuts him off. He says, I'm not talking about that. This is something else. Ben then concerningly replies, are you and MJ okay? He says that they're great. But he says, it's just for the longest time, I've thought my life was wrong. Something was wrong with my life. And that something was wrong with me. I can't really explain it. But now I just know that I've been right all along. And then Ben replies and says, just do what you think is best for you and make it happen. Then he says, but if you're walking around half asleep, anesthesiaed by your, and I don't know how to pronounce that word, by your own life, then wake up. Peter goes home, he tucks his kids in, and he's ready to have a talk that he promised MJ in the morning that he'd have with her. And he basically repeats what he says to MJ. He says, would we be okay if I made a major change? I can't tell you what, but would you still love me and would you still stay with me? And MJ replies, go get him, Tiger. Just like she always says to Peter, calling him Tiger and such. Now, we finally see that sphere that was in his bag again once MJ leaves. And we flash back to last night. He's twiddling around on his computer, and all of a sudden, there's a big flash of light. And then someone says, this is Parker. Peter Parker. This is for Parker. Peter Parker. It's a box. He opens the box, and it's Tony Stark. Tony Stark basically informs him about everything that happened not everything that happened, but he basically tells him that this was stolen from him. He gives him this ball, and it flashes back to now. He touches the ball. The ball disintegrates away, revealing a black sphere and a test tube filled with a spider. He opens up the test tube, puts the spider on his hand, and the spider bites him. And then the issue ends. But luckily, you don't have to wait a month to see the conclusion to that, because we have the second issue right here. when we open this issue, it starts out February. So what's really cool, what Hickman is doing here, is that he's going. So if you don't know, which I'm going to assume you do, but if you don't, each month comics come out monthly. So that means the Ultimate Spider-Man comics come out monthly. So what he's doing here is that the equivalent time that passes in our own world between issues is what passes in the books, which is really, really cool. And I don't think it's ever been done before, to my knowledge. So we start out with the skyline of New York and Spider-Man swinging through. But what's different with Spider-Man here is that he has the black symbiote suit on. And he basically is like, it's just really cool to see him swinging around in the black suit. And as most of you will know, the symbiote suit eventually, conventionally, I'm not sure if they're going to do that in this universe, but becomes Venom and slowly corrupts him. Now, we then see another morning with Peter's family. Now, Richard, Peter's son, doesn't think he believes in, Spider-Man, or they don't know him as Spider-Man, but they know him as the masked dude who's swinging around in the city. However, May Parker is a little scared. She's the younger one. She believes it, and she's scared of him. I mean, if you learned that there was a dude swinging around in a full black suit with sharp white eyes, I think you'd be pretty scared too. But Peter reassures her and says, I don't think she's real. It's probably just Photoshop. Then we flash to nighttime. Peter's training. He's lifting up buses. He's trying to stick his landings, even though he hasn't perfected those. And after the training montage is over, we see Ben and Jonah talking in what's the name for those things? It's, I think, a steam room. I don't know. It's the thing where you're in towels and it's steamy. It doesn't really matter. So basically, they discuss what's going on recently. What's going on, we learn that Fisk has been attempted assassinations, like we said when his car blew up, multiple times since then. But the Bugle is not reporting on it. What the Bugle is instead reporting on is Spider-Man. So what they think is that Spider-Man is a distraction for the Bugle to take away from what they don't want you seeing is the assassination attempts on Wilson Fisk. And Ben's like, luckily we have an inside man, and obviously referring to Peter. And they're basically like, well, let's get to work. Then we flash back to Peter training once again, and this time he spots someone. From the building next to him, he sees someone trying to break into a house. And this is what I actually really like about this second issue, and what I think might put it above the first issue. You see, the first issue had great world building and characters, and I really liked it. However, this has that same world building, the same characters, and improves upon that. It's crazy, good Spider-Man action, and great humor. Now, we see this when Peter's like, let me guess, lost your keys, when he comes up right behind Shocker. Shocker's like, and he's like, and Peter's like, why are you doing this? You shouldn't. This is a pretty bad idea, right? And the Shocker's like, oh yeah, you're right. You know what? I owe it to you. You might have turned my life around just now. And he puts his hand out to shake Peter's hand. And then he shakes Peter. Peter falls off the building into the dumpster. And what I found really, really weird about this that I haven't thought about before, the Shocker doesn't know that Peter can survive this fall. So the Shocker in this universe literally just tried to murder Peter. He didn't think, well, a regular person would not think to push someone off a building just because they caught you. But who knows? Seems like Shocker is more of a killer in this book. Now, Peter, being disgruntled, climbs back up to his own building and goes into his room. Well, no, his kitchen. He opens the refrigerator, gets a pint of ice cream and a spoon, lifts up the part of his mask, calls himself an idiot, turns on the TV, starts to eat the ice cream, but then a scared May Parker just starts to cry. And he runs over to her and he's like, shh, 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 don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. He's like, it's me, it's your dad. And she's like, but you're Spider-Man. And it's kind of funny. All right. And he shares ice cream with her, and he's basically just like, don't tell Mom and Franklin, and bribes her with the ice cream. Then we have Fisk basically being put in his place by this guy with I don't know, it might be the Maker, with a ponytail and a goatee. And he's basically kind of like blackballing Fisk, and it seems as though that this guy's in charge of Fisk. We're not really sure what their whole motivation is. But then we flash back to another night. Peter sees Shocker again, and this time he actually has broken into the place. Peter punches him a little bit and gets some good blows on him. And then once he almost subdues Shocker, Shocker's like, starts coughing, and he's like, I think you broke my rib. And Peter says, sorry about that. Don't know my own strength. And he's like, my wife. It's my wife. She's dying. We don't have enough money. And so we can't pay for the treatments she needs. She needs this, so I don't have any other choice. What would you do if you were in my shoes? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I can't imagine what that must... Wait, is that true? And then Shocker says, what do you think? And shocks him off the building yet again, and he falls into the dumpster. Then Shocker gets away, but what we see, the panel lingers. And the Green Goblin was watching all of this. Then Peter comes back into his apartment, downs not a gallon, but a good amount of milk, and sees that on the fridge, his daughter May drew a picture of a spider and saying, Dad, I drew a picture of your spider. I hope you like it. You're the best. Love, May. And he says, you know what? Maybe I'll give this thing one more day. And that basically reinvigorates his ambition for being Spider-Man. Now, these comics show real big potential. And with the coming release dates of Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Black Panther, I'm really excited for the future of the Ultimate Universe. Each of these issues excel at what they're trying to do, and I really hope that throughout the Ultimate Universe, this can be even stronger than the one that came before it. But anyway, me just explaining to it does not at all give it justice. You guys need to pick these up. Ultimate Spider-Man 1 might be hard to get. Even I had a hard time getting it. I had to get a second printing, and I believe they're coming out with various different versions of a third printing. So definitely get that. But yeah, these are great books. The art is great. And obviously it's Hickman. The writing's great too. But anyway, guys, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh, and buy Ultimate Spider-Man and any other Ultimate book. But anyways, bye, guys.